running a company or something, for example, like you wouldn't wing it and like, not track how much money you have or something like that. Like that's like a very obvious thing that like, if it's important, you should have that. So I think it's a similar case here where you want to be well informed and make these decisions with the right, information and know what the trade-offs you're making are. Like, hey, if I eat this pizza, like what's that going to do? And that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but like you should be aware of that and kind of have the full information and the history of that and stuff. So I think overall, like having the information and access to it in the right context and awareness is almost always a good thing.
Hey, welcome to this week's episode of the Human Enhancement Podcast. This is your host, Jeffrey Wu. And I think this is going to be a really fun one because I'm having my friend Anand Sharma, who is an entrepreneur and founder and CEO of, I think, probably the most popular quantified self app out there today, an app called Gyroscope. And I found it personally be one of the best apps at visualizing all of my quantified self data by biometrics, what I'm doing all the time, where I'm traveling. A really clean service, and I think really setting a bar for UI for not just quantified self or biohacking apps, but also just apps in general. So excited to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think the design aspect really carries through. So I remember first seeing you post about your own personal dashboard, like your handle, like April 0, like this is like 4 or 5 years ago, and it looked like something out of Iron Man or a Marvel superhero movie around like your dashboard of all your metrics. Where did that inspiration come from? Or like where did that polish, sleekness? I mean, I think in some ways you've kind of set the bar on what quantified self or biometric apps should look like. I think we had a conversation about how certain companies or certain apps kind of stealing or borrowing your concepts and putting it into their products. I'm curious to hear where did this inspiration come from?
Yeah, so that was a fun project. It was about 2 or 3 months to like build that whole thing, but it was also in some ways like a 10-year process. Like April 0, when that was launched as a site, was my metrics and stuff in a dashboard, but I'd been working on it for about 10 years. It was like basically that website has just been my blog since forever. And it'd be like art things I would write or photos I would post and stuff. And every few years I'd kind of redesign it, and it was sort of always evolving. But and so I kind of had like ideas like for years of like here's what I'm gonna do for the next one. Here's like the potential design styles and stuff. But one of the biggest bottlenecks there that I always found was like I didn't really have time to I want it to be a really cool website and like reflect who I am and like, as a designer and stuff. Like your personal website sort of says a lot about you, but I also didn't have time to spend like 20, 30 hours a week, like writing this post and content and like populating it. And so, but like I had ideas for like the style, and, like what it should feel like. And like, those kind of more a reflection of like myself and what I was like, a personal style at the time. But then it kind of came together when I realized like there was all this like passive data and stuff coming in that could be automated, and you tie that with like here's like what my personal brand or style should kind of look like. And a lot of techniques and stuff that I've been working on for a long time, but kind of all finally just came together. But yeah, it was like a fun 2 or 3 month exploration, and that was I think especially fun because it wasn't a company or a product or anything. It was just me like messing around with my site. I wasn't even sure whether it would be like a website I launch or just like a personal thing that I have for myself. So I could kind of just do whatever and not care too much about like things like usability or, scaling and stuff. And yes, I wasn't sure what people would think or if anyone would even get it, but I decided to put it up one day, and apparently a lot of people liked it or found it intriguing and saw it on the internet. A lot of things kind of came from that. I think that's probably when you discovered it as well. But yeah, I think, there was like this vision of like, here's what the future should be, or like, here's, the type of data we should have about our bodies and all these cool things that like, we should have by now. But yeah, I think there was this big disconnect between like, actually like none of that had even like started to materialize. So wanted to kind of close that gap and sort of think like 10 years from now, like, what are we going to all be using? Like, what is this going to look like? What kind of like information are we going to have about our blood levels, and how is it going to be real time and stuff?
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. I think that's something that we share a common vision of the future. It just makes sense that we'll have a dashboard of all our key biometrics. So, for the audience out there who might not be as up to speed on different biometrics that are important to track, what have you found with yourself or with Gyroscope users are the most popular metrics that they're tracking? What do you see popular today? What do you see, potentially popular or important down the line?
Mm-hmm. It's been very interesting to see like the evolution over the last few years, and how much more easy a lot of these things are to track, and how they've scaled from like a few people have them to like everyone can easily get them. So like, for example, continuous heart rate monitoring now is just like so easy, and like everyone's like got one on their wrist. Whereas like when we started, that was that was not a thing. Like with April 0, I was actually like checking my heart rate like with my phone camera like 3 or 4 times a day, and like manually syncing it up. That was considered like a lot of measurements. So it's really cool to see like how rapidly that's changed, and it's continuing to do so. I think there's a bit of difference here in like what I sort of personally track myself or have access to, and then what's like mainstream or like can be sort of done in the product. So there were like some more obscure things that I was tracking years ago that are still not really like out. Like, for example, I was into rock climbing for a while, and I would like annotate like which route I did and what color it was and stuff like that. And like once we launched this as like a product for people like that, it's just like dropped off because it's such a random thing. But like we had like automatic gym tracking instead, where it just like if you go to any gym that's like a Foursquare location, then that shows up. So that's like a bit simpler, but a lot more practical. Some of the stuff that's new in the last year or so that we're really excited about, I think one of the biggest ones is heart rate variability. That's like we're just starting to get a lot of that coming in now, and I think that's going to have a lot more meaning and exploration over the next few years as it becomes like available to everyone, kind of like heart rate was a few years ago. I think the main difference here is like there's a lot more meaning to it, whereas when everyone had like heart rate data, there's interesting stuff there of how when it's when you're resting, like what it is, but less like there's not as much detail to it. But yeah, and personally, I've been tracking a lot of stuff. I haven't been doing like my blood levels and stuff as much lately, especially just while traveling and stuff. It's a bit harder, but that's something for a while I was doing pretty constantly, and I think is a really useful thing. But that's also something that's like not very easily accessible to most people right now, and not commonly done, which I see changing in the next few years as well. And mood tracking is another thing that we've been focusing more on lately, which was something that we found is not really tracked right now. Like a lot of these are like very physical metrics, of how many steps you've done or how many hours you slept, but like more fuzzy things like how you feel or how much energy you have, which are actually things you might want to optimize. We're sort of still uncaptured right now. So that's some of the kind of stuff that we've been focusing on building more trackers for, getting a baseline and automating that process more.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's the input side, but I think the visualization part of Gyroscope is probably one of the most beautiful apps that are just out there. I like using it just to kind of visualize the routes that I run, or like what my commutes kind of look like, or when you're traveling, like what streets have you sort of traversed. What popular visualizations have people, been really excited about? I know that, you guys almost, at sort of the end of the year, you guys publish a big book. You could, order a book of all your data of the last year and have essentially this detailed, Iron Man style visualization of everything you've done. What's popular in terms of things that people want visualized?
Yeah, there's a few of them. I mean, I think at the end of the day, like we have all this raw data, but taking that and making it into something you can just look at and like you understand without having a lot of training or research, and that's the hard part, right? And if we can do that, and you see the pattern, then like you get excited about it. So a lot of the work we're doing is like uncovering that and like lining that up for you, so you can just like go through it and it's already arranged in the right way. A lot of I guess some of the most popular stuff that that we do is more spatial things, right? Like maps, I think, are a really easy one to understand. I think humans are just pretty wired to, if you'd rather see a map or like a list of JSON, like latitude, longitude. It's like one of them is like way, more meaningful, even though it's kind of the same exact data. And so like visualizing things in that way is pretty powerful. So we rely a lot on locations, and that's actually one of our big focuses for this year is making that whole process a lot more streamlined and doing our own location tracking and building that. But yeah, since we've started, one of the more popular features has been giving people a history of where they've been, what they've been doing, where the kind of places that they go to, and how they travel between them. Just what are you doing with your life, and like being able to visualize that and look back at it and kind of have better awareness of that. And so some of that's graphs, if you see your weight or your steps or other metrics. But a big part of what we do, which I think is different than a lot of companies and makes these a lot more meaningful, is adding more context around it. So, if you see your heart rate and it goes like way up, you're like, it's hard to know what that means. Maybe you're having a heart attack. Or, hey, if you see that you're at the gym, hey, that's actually good. Like, you want it to be high, right? So the context, I think, matters a lot, rather than just like, hey, it's a nice like graph. So having that information and kind of being able to show a whole story in each of these visualizations, rather than just like one data point.
What data sources are you pulling in from?
Mm-hmm. We pull a lot of stuff. I mean, it depends on what the person has, but for myself or someone who's really set up the whole app, it's across a bunch of different things. So like I said, the places that you go to, where you are in the real world is a big part of it, and how you got there. So like I walked home today. Everything that's like in Apple Health or available on your phone, we'll pull in. So that includes things like your steps and your heart rate if you have it. Now that includes like resting heart rate variability, a lot of stuff about like your heart, because that's pretty easy to passively track. Sleep, and then workouts is a popular one. So if you go running or biking or to the gym or swimming, or there's lots of different types of workouts. And that's like a very popular thing to track already for many years. So a lot of people have that. So that's something we'll load in. And then depending on what you're interested, so some people have like blood pressure or their blood glucose measurements or even blood ketones or more of these detailed things. That's not as mainstream, but some people have that, so you can see it. And sleep is another really big thing that we focus on. We started by just pulling that in from all the other sleep trackers that were out there. Then we kind of realized that none of them were very good. So we ended up building our own sleep tracking that people can use also if you don't have another one. And so between all of those, and then what you do on your computer is another big part of it. So, for most people, I think you're either sleeping or you're going out somewhere, or you're on your computer, or some combination of those. So at this point, we've got like a pretty good coverage of, what you're doing throughout the day, and how that affects you, and being able to show all that on a timeline, and figure out what you've been doing for the last week or month or year, and both look at any individual day if you want to just look up the logs of what happened on June 7th or some random day, or see that in aggregate to see what the pattern is. How have you been spending too much time on Facebook instead of working, or are you getting enough sleep, or is it a low unhealthy amount that you should fix? So these things are a lot easier to see, understand once you just have the data and you can look back at it.
Absolutely. Like, we are just basically excreting out data everywhere. Like, what kind of websites we're browsing? Are we on our email client doing something perhaps productive? Are we on Facebook? Are we on Twitter? We're checking in on Instagram, and collating it all into one beautiful spot on Gyroscope seems to be, a nice way at the minimum that you're already dumping all this information everywhere. Might as well have it in an aggregated nice spot so you can actually look at it holistically.
There's a lot of data out there, and companies have been doing this for a long time. I guess when I first started the April 0, that was around the time where like the whole NSA thing was happening. Now it's the Facebook and the Russians and stuff, but tracking data and stuff like that has been going on for a long time, but it's always kind of been done by companies or bigger organizations for making them money. I don't think it's ever really been used like to help people directly or improve their health or something, but it's very powerful. So I think, the stuff is already there, and so if you can leverage it to actually, help yourself, then I think that's very
Yeah.
practical.
Do you have any personal stories or user stories on how they've been able to help themselves through data?
Yeah, we have quite a few. I mean, I think, ultimately this is just a tool. Like, it's not actually, sending signals into your body and changing something. Like, the only impact is if it motivates you into doing, realizing something and changing your behavior. But there's a lot of stories of that. People write in every day about how it's helping them, or we have some stories that we put on our blog. Um, I think there's still way more impact we can have. I personally, it's been really useful to me to have, these tools and warnings and stuff, and especially while running a startup, which is pretty stressful and unhealthy at times, and like being how to balance that with not with taking care of your body is something I've sometimes struggled with, and often if I'm just working or stressed out, it's very easy to be unhealthy, and how to balance that.
So how do you know when you're unhealthy? Like your weight creeps up, your heart rate variability goes down, your heart rate goes up. I mean, like, what are the warning signs for
Yeah,
you?
yeah, all of those. I mean, weight is a big one. Like, we're weight and like getting sick, both of those. I think like every time we launch a new feature for a while, I would just get sick afterwards because it was like a 1 or 2 week like sprint of not resting enough, and then so that wasn't great. And yeah, like gaining weight was another kind of common thing after losing skipping sleep or not eating healthy while you're just like in work mode and just order pizza or something like that. If you do that for too long in a row, then that really adds up. So having those tools and dashboards to warn you of that when you need to know about it, rather than like 5 years later you realize and it's like, oh, I wish I'd done something differently. We want to avoid that. And yeah, a lot of other people use it as motivation for workouts or weight loss. Those are really some of the bigger ones because that data is just so ubiquitous. A lot of people have access to that. I think in the next few years we'll see a lot more stuff around sleep, improving your mental health as much as your physical health, your mood and stuff like that. I think there's a lot more room for improvement there. And that's a lot less figured out of like what that looks like. Like losing 10 pounds is a very obvious thing. You can sort of see that on your scale, but I think there's similar like mental health equivalents that we're gonna discover and want to help people achieve.
So you're integrated with different scale companies, right? So it's just like automatically passively imported in the weight,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. If you have like a Fitbit scale or I guess they used to be called Withings and now it's Nokia. Those scales, it's pretty cool. You just step on it and it checks your weight and your body fat. And that shows up. And so a lot of people, yeah, they have like measurements every day. So when you're doing that kind of continuous monitoring, it's a lot harder to like, oh, how did I gain 20 pounds? Because you'll see it over time.
That's like one integration I don't have on my gyroscope. I'm gonna look into it because, I mean, I think I've been lucky to not really have to worry about weight management as a problem. But it sounds like but if I'm working out, like I do like see fluctuations right now, like. I'm like running a lot these days, and I'm trying to lift a lot and eating keto. And it's interesting. I want to kind of track my body fat percentage and weight.
It's easy to justify like weight, like, oh, it's probably muscle, so that's fine. But then if you see the actual body fat percentage, then that kind of helps with that. But yeah, I actually don't even have that myself anymore because I've just been traveling around so much. So now I just check my weight every time I go to the gym. So there's actually a little less data there. But yeah, having that, it's definitely, I would recommend it as like a pretty easy like integration that just like gives you way more like history about yourself.
So you mentioned sleep a lot, and I'm going to go to an audience question from Mr. Fresh 2017 from Reddit. And you mentioned about building your own sleep algorithm. So he wants to ask, how does the sleep AI actually work? Does it simply just calculate phone downtime during the hour one is normally asleep?
So yeah, basically the way we get sleep, there's a lot of sleep trackers out there that will save to Apple Health, and if you're using one of those, then we'll reuse that data, and we'll just show that. But if you don't have that, then we'll try to calculate it ourselves, and we call that Sleep AI. But basically, it works by using all the different data types that we have, not just your phone or steps, but that's one of them. And basically, if you look at like the graph of your day and you have enough types of data, it's very obvious like when you're asleep, like your heart rate goes down, your steps are lower, non-zero, like you might be moving around during the night and stuff, but there's much less than like when you're awake. You're probably not on your computer, etc. So we have like 3 or 4 different signals that we use at the same time to try to most accurately figure out when you were asleep. It's not perfect, but it's much better than like not having that history. And then what we do is in the morning, we show that to you and we let you like adjust it. So for me, it's never like 100% correct of, hey, it just automatically figured out. But it takes me about 3 seconds to like fiddle with it and like make sure that's exactly like when I slept, and hit save. And that's like, I've tried all the different sleep trackers out there. This is really just like the simplest, easiest way for me to track that every day. It's pretty foolproof.
Especially without having a hardware piece, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean, so I do have I don't have like a dedicated sleep tracker, which used to be kind of a popular device to buy, but yeah, I've got like an Apple Watch now that I wear and a phone and all these other like, expensive devices, which get the data. So, they can be used for sleep tracking too. And actually that does bring me to one of the important points, which is like wearing the watch at night. I know a lot of people, a lot of our users even like don't do that or take it off when they're sleeping, which is actually probably like the most important time where you want to have like your heart rate monitoring on. That's when you get like the HRV numbers, and that's when your resting heart rate's most useful. And then that'll make our sleep tracking like actually more accurate than if it was just looking at your phone. So that people, if you wear, the ideal thing that I do is I just wear my Apple Watch, go to sleep, wake up, then I check the app and it like shows me when I was asleep. So that's how we've done it for the last few years. A lot of users have just built up a history of that automatic sleep tracking, and then we can look at how long you slept, when did you go to sleep, wake up, how that changes over time. That stuff's super obvious. You probably know a lot more about sleep than I do, and like how important it is and how much you should sleep and stuff. But that's a very important thing. Everyone sleeps that I know of. So drop that. But so the exciting, and so that's how we've been doing it for the last few years. The exciting thing that's coming up now is we're starting to get this heart rate variability data also at night from the Apple Watch. Like usually 4 or 5 samples if you just wear it at night and I have a proper fit. And that until now we've been using resting heart rate as kind of a signal for how deep you're sleeping and stuff. But I think the heart rate variability is like even better. And so that's kind of one of the ways we're using it to figure out the next morning, like, was it good sleep? Are you recovered? Should you sleep more? Is that enough? What really happened there? And kind of give you more details about that. So right now people can just do that manually, and we just show you like what your heart rate variability was. In the future, we'll probably do more analysis around that and like try to tell people what it means, because there's still a lot of confusion about that. But that's kind of one of the exciting things that I think that's going to help a lot of people sleep a lot better, get more rest, be more recovered.
Yeah, heart rate variability is going to be one of these metrics where you can have like a whole podcast episode all about nerding about all the data and science behind HRV. But I think just I think we talked about in our just offline conversations that it's actually pretty material how fast it changes, right? Like a super hard workout, you're not sleeping super well. It's one of those counterintuitive things. So you want the lower the variability is actually the worse you're recovered. So it's kind of, and it's actually pretty material. I'm sure that you probably have seen it when you're wearing your Apple Watch when you sleep, that like a good night's sleep, and a bad night's sleep, it's real. It's not like the data's kind of noisy. It's like, it's pretty material.
No, and sometimes it takes a few days to get there. Like if I haven't slept well, like I need like 2 or 3, 4 days of good sleep to finally get like the HRV back to like the good levels and stuff. So it's been really interesting. Yeah, these like counterintuitive measurements I think are the most important to track, because if it's like, what are your steps today? You probably have an idea of how much you walked, but like what's going on inside your heart while you were asleep, like you probably don't remember that one, right? So I think that's where the tracking really becomes important.
Well, I think it's just like personally cool to actually just have a kind of a record of what have you done all day long. I think we all have collectively like pretty bad memories of what we all do. Like I have no idea where I was 7 days ago. I mean, I could guess it's probably in the office, at my house, or at the gym or something, right? But like there's like the little restaurants that you go to, or little cafes where you meet a friend for like a coffee. There are kind of like nice, memorable memories that I think are worth like sometimes reviewing. Any other like delightful features that are like perhaps unintuitive that you've discovered as you've been building Gyroscope that users have mentioned, or things that you've built that surprised you and how people use it?
Yeah, I mean, I think our biggest focus has definitely been around health and the stuff get we we get with the mindset of how can we eventually use this to help people be more healthy. But there's a lot of stuff that's just like interesting or cool, that's like a part of your life, right? That may or not be like health related, but like we think you should still have that history and track, and it's part of who you are. So we just added music tracking, for example, so you can see what songs you listen to each day, and what albums you were listening to at a particular time in your life and stuff. And I'm sure you could figure out some sort of health implications of that. Of when you're sad, you maybe listen to this or that. But in general, that's just like a more personal thing of like who are you as a person? Like how does that separate you from another human? And like what makes you unique? And like what's your life story? And like how do we want to be able to capture that? Make it more personalized. Yeah, even whether you're a Yanny or a Laurel, I feel like is a big part.
I just discovered that meme today. What are you? I only hear Laurel.
Laurel,
are
yeah,
you a
well,
Laurel?
That's what they're saying.
Are you a Yanny?
Yeah. No. Definitely.
Okay. Anyways, for people that aren't on the internet all the time, there's this like audio clip. It's like very similar to like the blue black dress and the white gold dress meme from like a year ago. People can't. They play a clip and people either hear Yanny or they hear Laurel. Apparently, I only can hear Laurel. I'm trying to hear Yanny. I can't hear it.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this kind of stuff because, well, like half of our users are Yannys. We posted in our like pro group, and like 50 people are like, yeah, well, you're Yanny. I'm like, oh, this is weird. But our whole team here is like fully Laurel, so it's just very confusing. But it's also interesting, just like people perceive things in different ways. Like our different users have different types of lives or ways they see things or hear things and stuff. And so how do we build for like all of them? Which is tricky because this started originally as like just something I built for myself and like tracking the things that I do. It's like scaling that out to different types of data.
I mean, I think in certain ways you're just offering like a palette of options, and people sort of gravitate toward what makes them, what excites them, what motivates them, and then they can sort of use it as they see fit. So it's like very much like a utility where people use electricity in multiple different ways, and people can use Gyroscope in multiple different ways. I'm going to move to another audience question. Legion of Seven on Twitter asks, what's the best way to experiment with nootropics?
I would say just in general, having like a baseline and benchmark is probably good for doing any type of study. And so when I played around with these things, I would, for example, track like my productivity and see that. But like seeing the actual numbers is a lot more useful than like, oh, I think I felt better. It's like very hard to quantify that. And so having like some sort of test and like a more scientific method to determine these things, which is part of what we try to provide with our platform. It's not like a very official part of it yet, but if you can measure how much you slept and your HRV during that time, or how many hours you were able to productively work during the week, or some of these other metrics, how fast you can run, seeing those actual numbers and how to change them and being unbiased about it is probably like a good approach, not just for nootropics, for like any life change or experimentation.
No, I mean, I would agree. I would just echo your thoughts there. Something like your productivity tracker. You're using rescue time, which just sits on your computer and detects, are you on your email? Are you on Facebook? Are you watching YouTube videos? And I remember when I was tracking that pretty aggressively through intermittent fasting or nootropics protocols, you could actually materially see some patterns when you were in a fasted state, or that was more obvious because I would only fast on Tuesdays. So you could kind of see a productivity shift around Tuesday. Nootropics, depending on the type of nootropics or the different routines you're doing, you could detect changes in mood, for example, if you're actually tracking mood very tightly. But end of the day, something like Gyroscope, which actually makes it easy to collect longitudinal data, is important for any intervention. Nootropics, a new diet, a new workout. If you don't measure it, you don't actually know what you're doing. Which actually kind of brings me into I want to be a devil's advocate here, because I think we perhaps it's from our engineering background that we very much care about data and visualization. But when I've talked to some elite athletes or folks in special operations, there seems to be this two different schools of thought. There's the scientists or the engineers who are just totally quantified, measuring everything, and then there's the animal instinct people that are just I don't measure anything. I'm just gonna fucking pick up a rock and just run. And I mean, it sounds like if you talk the really the best of the best do a little bit of both, and I think I'm sure that there's you want the best of all possible techniques. But I'm actually curious to hear your responses to some of the critique or criticism. Hey, do you want to track everything? Is this useful? Is this just data porn? What is your response to that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that comes up often, and I think there is a natural tendency to not want to track things and be free and just go by your gut or your instinct, which I think in some cases is fine. The human body is kind of designed to go on autopilot for a while and survive, and so I think that gets people far enough. And if you're super healthy already or a skilled athlete or something like that, then maybe you don't even need to micro optimize these things. I think there's a few details here. One is what's the cost of tracking it? So if every hour you have to pull out Excel and write these things down, and it's very disruptive to your life, then that's probably not worth it, right? Because it's very not a good use of your time. But if it's 100% passive or very easy to track, then it's then that argument really goes down. And it's well, what you should probably have some records of things if there's no downside besides wanting to just ignore it. And then I think finding balance in these things is important. So how do all these things go together, right? If you're really physically healthy, but there's other parts of your life that maybe you're neglecting. I think, at least for myself, if I'm working a lot, then maybe there's something else that's getting skipped, like my physical health, or vice versa. And so balancing all those different parts of your life, I think that's a constant challenge for everyone. Even if you're naturally very, very healthy, maybe there's other parts that would benefit from that approach. So I wouldn't say that there's I don't know, maybe there are people who have everything down and by instinct, but I would say that can be useful. I mean, as for running a company or something, for example, you wouldn't wing it and not track how much money you have or something like that. That's a very obvious thing that if it's important, you should have that. You're not 100% making all your decisions solely based on what some accountant says or just the numbers or the A/B tests, but knowing those are really important decision making factors for you to make the correct decision in context. And so I think it's a similar case here where you want to be well informed and make these decisions with the right information and know what the trade-offs you're making are. Hey, if I eat this pizza, what's that going to do? And that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but you should be aware of that and kind of have the full information and the history of that and stuff. So I think overall, having the information and access to it in the right context and awareness is almost always a good thing, as long as that doesn't come with a lot of mental overhead or time to track that and extra stuff, which I think has been the issue until now, where to have all this stuff, you really had to go out of your way, and it was very disruptive and stuff. So no one was ever able to do it very passively.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. I'm curious to just now go into sort of theory craft mode. I know you talk about HRV as an exciting feature in the immediate term that you guys can implement, but if there's blue sky, any biomarkers that you could track, regardless of how crazy it is to track right now, and assuming it could be done really easily and passively. What's like your dream suite of signals?
Yeah. I mean, the human body is just so complicated. And I think we have very little understanding of what's going on inside that, especially day to day. Really being able to just monitor all of those. So, I mean, some obvious ones are like your blood sugar and insulin and that whole process of eating. I mean, weight loss is just such an obvious, or not weight loss, but just your weight and that whole system in general is
metabolism
like
in general. Yeah.
the most like obvious thing that a lot of people focus on, and that has a lot of like health implications for your lifespan and how you feel and everything. So I think that that's probably one of the most interesting ones. But everything about your brain, like every organ, I think could have its own little metrics, and you see how you're doing, and the more detailed data you have about that, the more accurate this will be. And so I think like in a dream world would have like different ways of really seeing what's going on inside your body and giving you like status updates, and ideally you just be able to keep doing your thing. And if there's anything you ever need to know, or like a warning that something that needs attention, then you'd be able to like deal with it and see make sure it's fixed, and be like, I think that would be like the dream scenario.
I think like passive mood tracking would be pretty damn cool if it just like you could just like automatically quantitatively like just, hey, you're 20% disgruntled, but 30% excited, and when you see someone you really like, it automatically just goes to 50% excited. You see a cute girl or boy, then it's like 70% excited, right? Like that could be kind of cool.
Yeah. Your brain is like just a bunch of neurotransmitters, right? So even just seeing like what those levels are and stuff like that. And the effects that has, or what parts of your brain are activated and how much. And that stuff would be totally cool. I don't know if anyone's working on that. You'd probably know that they are, but
I don't know. I mean, I think it'd be hard to collect that data. Like, can you do something like reading micro expressions with like a environmental surrounding? You have cameras, or I wonder if you just like do a blood tap into your spine and you pick up neurotransmitter levels.
For now, you have to manually enter that into the app of whether you're happy or not. But I think we'll start to. The HRV stuff is actually interesting because that correlates pretty well to like the mood levels that people are like manually tracking. They're not like 1-to-1, but like there's a big relation there. So I think over time, a lot of these things that sound kind of crazy, it's not exactly going to be what you described, but I think we'll have some metric or some way of like really going deeper into these things, and getting a lot. I think like in the next 5-6 years, like so much stuff's going to happen. Like it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah. One of the inspiring things about your company is that it's a relatively lean group of people. I mean, how do you run the business? It sounds like I just want to sort of tease into the behind the curtain here. It sounds like you have a distributed team, and you sort of like became like a relative nomad for your, popping around visiting your distributed team. What's your setup? I mean, can you describe your setup and how you decided to kind of break the norm of having like a typical HQ?
Yeah, we started in San Francisco and had office there like briefly in the beginning, but now the team is all distributed. We have 3 people full time that all live in different cities, as well as contractors who are around the world also working on Gyroscope. And we'll usually just work on our own and then get together in person once in a while. I hadn't done the remote thing before. Like our last company was we had an office in Soma, like many startups do. But it's been interesting to be able to hire people from all around the world and just focus on who's the best at this rather than like who's in the area. And also, I've just enjoyed it personally of being able to travel around and be more flexible rather than like spend my whole life on this like 3-block radius in San Francisco, which I've done for years. So we're pretty small. Everyone works really hard, which I guess is how we've probably been able to do all this stuff so far with a really small team. We just hired a new iOS engineer this month named Adam, who's a 3rd person now, full time, and that's really exciting. So we plan to hire a few more people and keep growing this year. But I think being distributed and has let us be very like heads down and get a lot of stuff done. Where if we were a bigger company or had an office or stuff, I think we'd probably be a bit less individually productive. Um, and yeah, it's been fun so far. I think the remote, it's not what we're trying to pioneer. Like we're definitely focused on health, but I think just in general in the last few years, I would say the remote team has had a lot of interesting
Yeah. I'm sure there's like a lot
things.
of different pros and cons. I mean, like I just know that, when I'm sort of passively seeing your social update that you're like in Japan, like eating really good looking sushi, or like you're in New York, or you're here and there. I mean, that's obviously seems like to be a big plus. I think I know for myself, there's definitely a part of me that wishes I could be on like sort of a nomadic life where I'm just like visiting the world, being able to do work, be able to pay my bills and sort of travel. What is that the big main upside? I mean, from a lifestyle perspective, like when you're working, you're focused. But when you walk outside the door from out of your laptop, you get like a new environment. Does that inspire you? I'm just curious to get some of the soft fuzzy aspects of of your
I think
lifestyle.
that's one of them. I mean, I think for the company in general, it's been being able to just hire people in different places and has been great. For me personally, yeah, I enjoy being able to just go. Like last month, I was in Japan for about a month, and it was like super productive. I'd say that's like definitely where I get most of my work done. Like I think we did like half of our.
Why in Japan?
I don't know why. I have a few theories. One is that like the different time zones is like no one online during the day to like distract me, and there's
So all
like
your
no one
friends
to
are back
talk
in
to. So
America. So
all my
like,
friends are like asleep. And then so it's like very focused, and you can really get into your deep work zone. Um, my other theory is around like the omega 3s from the sushi, and um, that I'm not sure if that's actually true, but no, it's like a very productive and like inspiring like place to go for a little while and just like really focus on like the hard projects. Um, and that was where I built a lot of the original April Zero site too. So, um, but yeah, and so I enjoyed that a little bit. And yeah, just being able to really get in the zone while when you're doing. Right now my schedule is like I'll go to one or two different coffee shops in the area, or um, and like stay at each place for about 2 hours. I find it's it's very easy to like. So we track steps for almost everyone, and like for a lot of people it's very low. It's very easy to just like be in a building all day, like drive to and from work, and it's like actually like super unhealthy. And I was doing this for a long time too, and I kind of realized like that's not great. Especially for extended periods of time. So now I really try to like walk somewhere in the morning, like keep moving every 2 or 3 hours. I think it's both good for your body and also just like mentally great. So now I kind of like in yoga there's like this like whole concept of like one movement per breath. And I kind of have a similar thing of like one like to do item per place. So like go somewhere and have like one thing I need to do, and then I'll like have to get it done. Otherwise I can't leave. And then once that's done, you can like walk around a little bit and like grab a bite, and then you go somewhere else and like do this thing. And it's kind of optimizing for a bunch of different things at the same time, both like staying healthy and going places, as well as being productive and getting stuff done, as well as like just exploring and like not missing out on
yeah.
things.
I mean, that's something that I've been thinking about a lot. How do you intertwine your career with actually being healthy, right? Like, I was talking to Ben Greenfield, who's a biohacker, pseudo professional athlete guy, and he'll like do his business, and then he'll do like a bunch of pull-ups, and then like answer emails on a treadmill, on a walking treadmill, and then like read a book, and then go into a sauna, and then like do more work. And like sounds like you've kind of incorporated that into your cycle, right? It's like you do a code sprint, you bang out a bug or build a feature, and then walk and change the scenery, get some fresh air, get some sun. Um,
Oh yeah, sun's important too.
yeah,
For
I like I've been wanting to figure out how to do that for us at Human, right? Like, should we have like a squat rack in the office? Should we have like some, like, because like you're right, like it's not normal to just be on your butt for 8 hours straight. Like, I've been, we have standing desks here. We're trying to stand more, but it's still like awkward in terms of like it's weird when you just see your coworker kind of just like walk out or like start doing push-ups. I guess like it's not that weird in our office anymore where people like just roll on a foam roller or like hang on an inversion table or do some push-ups. But I think we need to have like a culture where it's like okay to just do that,
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's probably not too weird to do that at your office, I imagine, but I'm sure for most of the world, that's definitely like not the norm. And I think that's unfortunate because like the default like state of, just going to work and doing normal things is just like default unhealthy for, and that's like sort of the typical culture that people end up stuck with. And I'm hoping that'll like change over time as people be more aware of this stuff, and tracking and seeing that is one of those. So we about a year ago we built this like Slack bot for ourselves that like would post like a leaderboard of who's walked the most during the day and stuff, and that was really interesting to see. And I'm hoping over time like more and more companies will take that more seriously rather than just like, hey, we bought you all health insurance, like have fun now, go work like 8 hours in your desk, right? Like I think there's more responsibility there, both like on the company and manager side as well as just like people being more aware of that. It'll probably take a while to change, but like, yeah, ideally you wouldn't just, it'd be like a healthy default environment where you're not like sacrificing your health to get more stuff done. Because I think ideally like the two aren't competitive. Like you don't have to choose between being healthy or like getting work done. And like, company's going to do better if you like sacrifice your health. Like I think ideally, at least for me, I'm guessing you probably have a similar thing. Like you're most in the zone when you've had like a good workout and you're balanced and you're feeling like energetic. That's when you do your best work and have the most ideas. You can probably, focus more, not when you're like stuck at your desk for like 3 days straight. Like that's not going to be like the most high up, both by quality and time. So I think, scaling that out to companies in the world's, hopefully something will happen soon. I haven't seen too much there yet. I think the remote stuff makes it a little easier. But yeah, I think that there's still a lot of room for improvement there.
Yeah, because I think when you're remote, there's no pressure for, I guess, the drama of looking productive, right? Because I think most people, and I don't want to overgeneralize, but I had like a normal job back in the day, and I just know that most of the time it's not productive. You're like faking productive, so like your coworkers or boss don't think you're like not doing anything. But sometimes like there's nothing better to be doing. So like why don't you just like actually move around a little bit, get some new ideas, and then bring that energy back in, right? Like, and I think a lot of our lives are this feigning productivity, and there's a acting or a role playing involved with that. And I think by being remote, it forces you to like not, or like, it doesn't have, you don't have the pressure as much anymore.
Yeah, I think that definitely helps a little bit. I mean, there's still Slack and stuff, so you can see when people are online. So I think a lot of it is a cultural thing of just making that like an acceptable thing of like, if you want to go to the run or to the gym or something, like, great, that'll probably help you like work more and think better. So that's like encouraged. Yeah, absolutely.
Downsides?
Actually, so one of the, I think like we live in like big cities, or San Francisco, New York, or whatever. Everything's pretty walkable. It's like very easy to go out. But one of the other things I've noticed, like a lot of world, and it's hard, you can't just do that. Like everyone drives everywhere. It's so much easier to have like an order of magnitude lower steps because you're only like walking around inside your building, or like when you go to the gym or something. So I don't know we don't really have a good solution for that right now. But that's kind of seeing like the overall trends and data is also something I've kind of noticed.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, like, I mean, I was going to ask you the sort of the downsides to remote stuff. But I think this is a more interesting topic. I mean, like you've seen, or at least I've seen, like the data analysis of like OkCupid on like dating trends, or I don't know. I guess that's like the one most obvious thing that it pops up. It sounds like you have an interesting set of data on all these people. And it sounds like there's some pattern where if you live in a city that's walkable, you have a lot more steps than like someone living in Los Angeles where everyone drives. Like, is that like 20% more, 30% more? Do you have a metric?
Yeah, I haven't exactly looked at the numbers. I'm mostly basing that just looking on like our team stats and a few other people. like Madi lives in Ottawa, and earlier it was like really cold there and winter and all, but even otherwise it's very like everything's in a car and stuff. So the steps are like way lower even when you go to the gym and stuff. And I haven't really figured out a good solution for that right now. But yeah, I think, and some people have made their accounts public on Gyroscope and stuff. So it's interesting. Like, I think there's going to be interesting stuff with like more transparency and like people sharing more of this stuff and finding these long-term trends. But I think like once you know these stats and you can like identify these issues, then people can start like actually thinking about solutions and having these conversations and like figuring out what to do about it and stuff.
I just wondered if you have like aggregated like blog posts on certain things. That could be cool, right? Like I was just wondering.
Something we want to do. Yeah, it's just something we haven't had much time to play with yet. But I think there's so much.
Like, I gotta imagine there's so much information there, right? Like, there was an election where people walking to the polls, or I don't know, there's a soccer match. Is everyone just sitting on their butt for like 5 hours? Or like, was there like, Mardi Gras with people in New Orleans like running around like crazy, right? Like, it just kind of be interesting to see what data you guys are pulling, what data you guys have.
Absolutely. So we launched HRV a little while ago, and we definitely got a lot of questions in from people of like, hey, this is what I have. Like, is that good or bad? Or, what does this mean and stuff? And so I think that's an example of where, having more like at scale research and analysis and stuff like that will help the whole community. And like a lot of stuff hasn't really been figured out yet, or people don't have a good understanding of how it compares to other people, and being able to like see your friends and kind of share notes on some of these other stats, whether it's your blood levels or HRV or something like that, which people don't have as much understanding about, rather than like steps or something, which I think steps now everyone's like pretty aware of and has and knows, but there's like 1,000 other things now that are like unexplored still. So yeah, that's doing some of that research and aggregate analysis and stuff like that. So that's something we want to start to look more into, and how these things affect other things of your mood and your sleep and your activity and all that stuff. And once we find trends, like how do we give that back to the community and like use that learning to elevate everyone.
Cool. I mean, as we're wrapping up here, what can we be excited for? I know that you might have a special offer for the Human Enhancement podcast listeners.
So the app is free for everyone in the for iPhone and Android, but we have a pro subscription which has a lot of more detailed stuff. And so for the first few people who enter this code on the website, you can get a 1 month of pro to try it out. And so the code is free month podcast, no spaces. And just go to gyroscope.pe/redeem, enter that in, and that will unlock 1 month of pro membership for your account. So hope to see how that helps you all.
Find Anand on Twitter, social, check out Gyroscope, and we'll keep in touch and see the progress as the rest of the year unfolds. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
What's good? Good. Hey, nice to meet you. Awesome. Yeah, everything all set? Do we sound good? Do we sound clear? Yeah, everything checks out. Yeah, glad to have you on the show. I know you and Jeff will kill it, so excited to get it rolling.
Yeah, it's overdue. I'm glad we're finally doing this. Yeah.
I'll put the screenshot.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't overweight it to other questions. I mean, I think the best podcasts are just actual conversations. I'll thread the questions in our conversation. I'm sure, like, these are some of the questions that our customers had or our audience, had. But I mean, I think there's just like a lot of interesting entrepreneurial stories that are sort of outside of these questions as well. So, like, I'm curious about your life. I mean, I think it's like interesting from a lifestyle perspective.